Here's what's going viral right now, a number. Watch it climb. 6,730, 8,000, 10,990. That's the top category ticket to the 2026 World Cup final. Not a suite, not hospitality. One seat, one match. When North America bid for this tournament, the official paperwork projected final tickets topping out around $1,550. By June 2026, the cheapest verified seat at that final was listed at $5,785. And if you want the full hospitality package, up to $73,200 for 90 minutes of soccer. Then, in June, something strange happened. FIFA quietly slashed prices not on a few games, on all 104 matches. Nobody runs a quiet fire sale on the biggest sporting event on earth unless something, somewhere, went wrong. So follow the money. Over the next 25 minutes, we trace every dollar. Who collects it, who spends it, and who gets left with the bill. By the end, you'll know exactly who pays for the World Cup. Spoiler, it isn't FIFA. This is the $13 billion World Cup. Start with the headline number. FIFA projects $13 billion in revenue for its 2023 to 2026 cycle, an all-time record. This film runs on one rule: follow the dollar. 3 questions every chapter: who collects it, who spends it, who keeps it. Quick game before we break it down. Of that $13 billion, how much comes from this single tournament? Lock in your guess. Answer: $8.9 billion. One summer, 3 countries, 104 matches, nearly 70% of the entire cycle. So where does $8.9 billion actually come from? 3 pipes feed this machine: broadcast, sponsorship, and the fans themselves. Pipe 1, broadcast. Networks worldwide pay for the signal, and this cycle that pipe grew from 3.1 to 4.3 billion. What they're buying is exclusivity. Every match, every market, locked windows. Live sport is the last thing audiences refuse to watch later. Pipe 2, sponsorship. Global brands pay roughly $3.8 billion to attach their names to a month of world attention. They're buying category exclusivity: 1 airline, 1 soft drink, 1 payment network, beamed into billions of living rooms for weeks. Pipe 3 is the one that exploded: ticketing and hospitality. Last cycle, roughly $950 million. This cycle, up to $3 billion. That's more than triple. And unlike the other 2 pipes, this one is filled directly from the wallets of ordinary fans. Now notice what all 3 pipes share. Every single one of them flows in the same direction, toward FIFA's headquarters in Zurich. FIFA sells the rights. FIFA signs the sponsors. FIFA runs the ticket portal. The tournament happens in America. The revenue doesn't stay. And here's the structure underneath everything. FIFA collects tournament revenue centrally, while the host cities shoulder the costs of staging it. One more rule before we go deeper. Everything stamped verified carries a source and date on screen. Everything else is labeled analysis. That distinction matters because World Cup money stories are full of impressive numbers that collapse under sourcing. We only keep the survivors. So why is the biggest edition in history happening in America? Because America was never just a host. It was the business plan. Rewind to 2015, years before any vote on the 2026 host. FIFA made a quiet decision that told everyone where this was heading. It handed US English-language broadcast rights to Fox for roughly $480 million, with no competitive bidding process at all. Spanish-language rights went to Telemundo the same way, $465 million. Again, no open tender. The existing deals were simply extended. That's nearly $1 billion in American television money, locked in 11 years before kickoff, and locked in without a single rival bid. The analysis at the time was blunt. FIFA now had every financial incentive for 2026 to land in the United States. It did. In 2018, the vote made it official. The United States, Mexico, and Canada together, the largest World Cup ever approved by FIFA. Largest, because FIFA rebuilt the tournament itself, 48 teams instead of 32, and 104 matches instead of 64. More matches means more tickets, more broadcast windows, more sponsor inventory. Expansion wasn't just sporting policy. It was revenue architecture. Now look at the map. 16 host cities across 3 countries, and 11 of those 16 are in the United States. Atlanta, Boston, Dallas, Houston, Kansas City. Los Angeles, Miami, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Seattle. 11 metros, one shared bill. Every one of those cities already had a stadium, NFL grade, 60,000 plus seats, built and paid for long before FIFA ever arrived. That's the quiet genius of the American plan. Total staging costs of $3.76 billion and 0 new stadiums required. Recent hosts spent years and billions building venues from scratch. America came pre-built. FIFA rents this country's stadiums instead of financing them. Add the world's richest advertising market, its most valuable television market, and tens of millions of soccer-curious consumers with disposable income. The schedule tells the same story. Most matches, and every single one from the quarterfinals onward, are played on American soil. Follow the dollar, and the 2026 formula is simple. Maximum revenue potential, minimum construction cost. No other bid on earth could match it. But cheap to stage doesn't mean free. Somebody still pays for security, transit, police overtime, and street closures across those 11 metros. Hold that thread, because later in this story, it becomes a projected $250 million problem for American taxpayers. We're coming back to it. So the venue bill was near zero and the TV money was locked. That left one revenue lever FIFA had never fully pulled. Ticket prices. For 96 years, World Cup tickets worked roughly the same way everywhere. Fixed prices set in advance, published for everyone. In 2026, FIFA scrapped that system entirely and ran the biggest pricing experiment ever attempted in the history of live sport. It's called dynamic pricing. And what happened next is why attorneys general in 2 American states are now asking formal questions. That experiment, the promises, the surges, and the quiet June retreat is where this money trail gets genuinely strange. Stay with me. Welcome back. June 2018. To win hosting rights, the North American bid filed official projections with FIFA, including projected ticket prices. The bid book projected a ceiling. The most expensive seat at the final would cost about $1,550. That number mattered. It was part of the winning sales pitch. An affordable, accessible American World Cup, open to ordinary working fans. 8 years later, ticket sales opened, and that written promise collided head-on with a piece of software called a pricing algorithm. For the first time in World Cup history, FIFA used dynamic pricing. Ticket costs that rise and fall with live demand. Airlines price this way, concert platforms price this way, but in 96 years of World Cups, none ever had until this one. Here's what dynamic pricing looked like in practice. Take the top category seat for the final at MetLife Stadium, New Jersey. Opening price, $6,730. Then demand hit and the algorithm answered, $10,990. That's a 63% climb. On a seat category the bid documents had once projected at about $1,550. Put the two numbers side by side. Promised ceiling, $1,550. Delivered ceiling, $10,990. That is roughly 7 times the promise. Not for hospitality. Not for a luxury suite. A regular Category 1 ticket to a match. And the floor? The lowest verified listing for any seat at this final. $5,785. That's the entry price. For context, and this is analysis, not FIFA's framing, that entry price rivals a month's take-home pay for many American workers. Above the regular market sits hospitality. Lounges, catering, premium views. Official packages for the final ran as high as $73,200. $73,000 is a new car. It's a year of college tuition. Here, it's one football match with catering included. Now, the honest steelman. FIFA's logic runs. If a seat can resell for more, pricing below market simply hands that profit to scalpers. Dynamic pricing lets the organizer capture the resale premium itself instead of letting brokers capture it. That's the defensible economic argument. But there's a difference between a concert and a World Cup. One is entertainment. This was sold to the public as a civic event. And unlike airlines, there was that bid book number, a written price projection that fans, journalists, and regulators could all point back to. Through the spring, prices kept moving. Fans documented seats jumping in cost between browsing sessions. Checkout itself became a moving target. By late May, the sticker shock was national news. NPR covered the backlash against World Cup dynamic pricing on May 28th. Then came June and the moment this film opened with. No press conference. No announcement tour. FIFA simply moved. Quietly. Prices dropped on all 104 matches. Every single fixture, repriced downward, discovered not by press release, but by fans' refreshing portals. At the same time, FIFA released roughly 70% of the hotel room blocks it had been holding across the host cities. Organizations don't usually cut prices on everything at once while demand breaks records. Analysts read it as a signal the algorithm overreached. FIFA has framed the adjustments as normal inventory management. Others, including 2 state attorneys general, had sharper questions. That story is next. The pushback came from 3 directions at once: fans, consumer advocates, and government lawyers. Let's take them in order. Evidence first. Fan groups argued the pricing broke the spirit and possibly the letter of the affordability projections inside the winning bid documents. Supporter organizations publicly criticized the finals prices as exclusionary for ordinary fans, the very people the American bid said it would serve. News organizations began auditing the promises. PBS fact-checked the bidbook projections against live portal prices and found the gap we've shown you. Consumer advocates raised a different issue entirely: transparency. If prices float freely, what exactly did buyers agree to at the moment of payment? Then came the subpoenas. The attorneys general of New York and New Jersey opened formal inquiries into FIFA's ticketing practices. Let's be precise about what that means. A subpoena is a demand for documents and testimony. It is not a finding of wrongdoing. The investigations are ongoing. No charges have been filed, and FIFA has defended its ticketing model as lawful and driven by demand. Why those 2 states? The final is played at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, metropolitan New York's shared backyard. Both states also carry consumer protection statutes covering deceptive pricing, the legal terrain where dynamic pricing disputes tend to eventually land. Now line up the calendar, because sequence is the story here. Late May, national outlets cover the growing pricing backlash. June, attorneys general request documents. Also June, FIFA reprices all 104 matches downward and releases 70% of hotel blocks. Correlation is not causation. We cannot verify what motivated the reversal. What's verified is the order in which everything happened. The hotel story deserves its own beat. FIFA's hospitality arm had reserved massive room inventory, betting big on premium package demand. Returning 70% of those rooms suggests the premium demand FIFA modeled, at the prices FIFA set, didn't fully materialize. Host city hotels suddenly received that inventory back in peak season, a late scramble that rippled through local tourism forecasts and budgets. FIFA's public position, for the record, the moves were routine market adjustments, standard practice, it says, for events of this scale. Meanwhile, and hold both of these thoughts at once, the tournament on the field was a genuine, verifiable runaway hit. Fox drew record American ratings for the opening match, and knockout round viewership kept climbing through the end of June. So both things were true at the same time: record demand for the product and a revolt over the price of admission. That tension, a genuinely hit product wrapped in a pricing trust problem, runs through the rest of this money trail. Because so far, we've only followed dollars flowing toward FIFA. Now we flip the ledger and follow the dollars flowing out. Out of city budgets, out of state coffers, and out of a federal fund administered by an agency you already know, FEMA. Welcome back. What follows may be the single most important arrangement in this entire story, so we're going to take it slowly. Under FIFA's host agreements, FIFA controls essentially all tournament revenue, tickets, sponsorship, broadcast, while cities cover their own staging costs. Guess the number, round 2. Of every dollar spent on World Cup tickets inside an American host city, how many cents stay local? 0. Not a single percentage point. Ticket revenue is FIFA revenue, top to bottom, in every one of the 16 host cities. So what do cities actually get? The event itself, crowds, exposure, hotel taxes, and the hope that visitor spending outweighs the bill. And the bill is real. Across the host cities, the projected collective shortfall runs to roughly $250 million. That's the thread from Chapter 2, paid off. The $250 million problem belongs to local taxpayers, not to anyone in Zurich. Back to the map of 11 American host metros, because each one is running its own version of the same math problem. Take Foxborough, Massachusetts, a town of under 20,000 people whose stadium suddenly joined the biggest sporting event on planet Earth. Foxborough's projected security tab, $7.8 million. For a town that size, that is not a rounding error. Police overtime, barriers, emergency staging, traffic control, costs that exist only because the world decided to show up for a month. Now multiply versions of that bill across Atlanta, Dallas, Miami, Seattle, and Los Angeles. Every host city wrote its own security check. The cities asked Washington for help. Congress set aside $846 million in federal security support for this tournament. On March 18, 2026, FEMA moved the first tranche, $625 million, distributed across the host jurisdictions. Read that through the follow-the-dollar lens, federal taxpayer money is underwriting security for a privately controlled, revenue-privatized global tournament. That's not a scandal by itself. Governments routinely secure major events, but it belongs on the ledger on the cost side. Cities signed up anyway because the sales pitch is seductive. Visitors, global television exposure, filled hotels, packed restaurants, a month-long spotlight. Host committees circulated economic impact studies projecting hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes billions, in local benefit for each city. Those studies are real documents. Whether their numbers survive contact with actual economists is a different question, and it's our next chapter. Remember the 70% hotel block return? For city tourism boards, that meant recalculating entire visitor forecasts just weeks before kickoff. FIFA's control runs deep into the details. Corporate stadium names are temporarily scrubbed, replaced for the tournament by FIFA's own neutral labels. City budget officers describe the event in unglamorous terms. A month of exceptional costs against benefits that arrive, if ever, indirectly. To be fair, the ledger has a plus column: hotel occupancy taxes, sales taxes on visitor spending, and long-run destination marketing value. The honest question isn't whether benefits exist. It's whether they're bigger than $250 million in projected public shortfalls. That question has an academic literature, decades of it, and the economists who study mega-events have reached an unusually strong consensus. What they found is the climax of this money trail. Chapter 6. What economists actually say, clearly labeled fact versus analysis. Quick label before we start. This chapter mixes verified findings with interpretation. Every analysis segment is marked on screen as exactly that. The verified part first. In June 2026, North Carolina State University economists published analysis warning that World Cup impact projections were overstated. They joined a long line. Sports economists at Smith College have argued for years that mega-event studies systematically inflate the benefits. Forbes ran the numbers critically in May. NPR followed in June. The skeptical case is now firmly mainstream, not fringe. So what do economists say is wrong with impact studies? 3 mechanisms, and once you see them, you can never unsee them. Mechanism 1. Substitution. When a local family spends big on a World Cup weekend, that money mostly moves from other local spending. The restaurant meal near the stadium replaces the movie night across town. The city's total barely moves, but the study counts it anyway. Mechanism 2. Crowding out. Mega events displace the visitors who would have come anyway, tourists who now avoid the chaos and the prices. Hotel rooms filled by tournament fans are rooms not filled by conventions, summer tourists, and the business travelers who quietly postponed. Mechanism 3. Leakage. Much of the money spent during the event flows straight out of town, to FIFA, to international chains, to outside contractors. Put the 3 together and the pattern emerges. Gross spending looks enormous, while the net local gain shrinks towards zero. The June analysis from NC State put it plainly. Projected windfalls from events like this rarely survive after-the-fact measurement. And here's the empirical kicker from decades of literature. Post-event audits routinely find a fraction of the benefit that was promised. Now, the counterargument deserves real airtime. 2026 is unusual. No stadium construction, existing transit, and genuinely record-breaking domestic interest. Some economists concede this addition could beat the dismal historical average, precisely because America didn't build anything expensive for it. But notice what even the optimistic case concedes. The upside comes from what wasn't spent, not from FIFA sharing its revenue. Which returns us to this film's central mechanism: Now visible in full. Revenue flows up and out, while the costs stay local. Privatized gains, socialized costs. Economists have used versions of that phrase about mega events for decades. 2026 didn't invent it, it scaled it. So if the host cities aren't the winners, who is? After the break, where the $8.9 billion actually lands. Welcome back. Time to open FIFA's outbound ledger, because money does flow back out of Zurich. Just very, very selectively. The headline: total prize and preparation money for 2026 is $871 million, the largest pool in World Cup history. $655 million of that is pure performance prize money. The remainder covers team preparation and delegation costs worldwide. Final round of Guess the Number. What will the champion take home after the final on July 19th? Lock in your guess. $50 million in prize money, and with preparation payments included, the winning federation clears more than $63.5 million. Even losing has a floor. Every one of the 48 qualified teams banks at least $12.5 million. Compare the pool with Qatar 2022. $440 million then, $871 now, an increase of about 65%. Clubs get a check as well. The Club Benefits Program distributes $355 million to clubs that release their players. That works out to roughly $11,000 per player, per day, paid to the players' club for every tournament day. Now do the follow the dollar math. Prize pool, preparation money, club benefits, call it $1.23 billion flowing back into football. Against $8.9 billion coming in. Roughly 14 cents of every tournament dollar goes back out to teams and clubs. The rest funds FIFA operations, its reserves, and, in FIFA's own framing, football development programs across its member associations worldwide. FIFA's defenders make a fair point. It's a non-profit federation, and surpluses are redistributed to global football development over time. Critics answer, that redistribution is opaque, and the entities that carried 2020 SIXS costs American cities aren't on the distribution list. Both framings can be true. What is not in dispute is the direction of flow during the tournament itself. Inward, toward FIFA. And notice who's missing from the outbound ledger entirely: the fans who paid $5,785 just to enter. Ticket buyers aren't shareholders. They are the revenue. In this ledger, fans appear on exactly one side of the page, forever. So the money lands with FIFA, with federations, and with clubs. Which leaves one final question before the verdict. Was it worth it? For that, we need the scoreboard, the verified numbers on how America actually watched this tournament. Right after the break. Welcome back. Every criticism in this film coexists with a fact that's uncomfortable for the critics. America is watching. In records. Fox posted record American ratings for the opening match, a verified high watermark for World Cup coverage in the United States. And it wasn't a curiosity spike. Through the knockout rounds, viewership kept climbing, with booming numbers reported on June 28th. Remember the broadcast pipe from Chapter 1? Fox paid $480 million back in 2015. Right now, that looks like a bargain. Telemundo's $465 million looks similar. However you judge the 2015 no-tender process, the audience delivery is unquestionably real. Demand for the product, in other words, is not this story's weakness. Americans wanted this tournament verifiably, measurably, historically. So let's build the final scoreboard. Column 1, FIFA. $8.9 billion in tournament revenue, on record global engagement. Column 2, teams and clubs. $1.23 billion in prize, preparation, and club benefits. The best paid World Cup ever staged. Column 3, broadcasters and sponsors. Record audiences delivered against prices locked in back in 2015. By any commercial measure, winners. Column 4, host cities. Roughly $250 million in projected shortfalls, partially cushioned by $625 million in federal funds. Column 5, taxpayers. That federal money is theirs. $846 million appropriated, whether or not they ever watched a match. Column 6, fans. The most expensive World Cup tickets ever sold, under a pricing system now under state inquiry. Ongoing. Unresolved. One last before and after. The bid promised. Affordable access and shared prosperity. The tournament delivered. Record revenue, record ratings, record prices. Every number on that scoreboard is sourced and dated on screen. The interpretation, who won, who lost, is where analysis begins. So let's finish the sentence this film opened with. Who actually pays for the World Cup? Final answer in 90 seconds. Who pays? Follow the $1 final time in reverse. The revenue, $13 billion across the cycle, lands with FIFA. The costs land everywhere else. On city budgets, on state police departments, on a federal security fund, on 11 American metros. And on fans who paid historic prices for seats that a bid book once promised would cost a fraction of that. That's the first true answer. Revenue is privatized to FIFA, and the costs are socialized to the public that hosts everything. But there's a second true answer, and honesty requires holding both. Americans showed up. Watched in record numbers. Wanted this tournament. A tournament can be a commercial extraction and a genuine national event at the same time. 2026 is verifiably both at once. The open questions ride into the final. 2 state inquiries, unresolved. City ledgers uncounted. Impact studies, awaiting their after-the-fact audit. We'll follow those dollars when the real numbers land, because the money story doesn't end when the trophy gets lifted. The final kicks off July 19th at MetLife Stadium. Whatever happens on the field, you now know what happened around it. If this breakdown earned it, subscribe. We trace the money behind the biggest stories, verified and labeled, every single week. Every source in this film is dated on screen and linked below. Read them. Check us. That's the point. This is the viral feed.